Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, I'm always shy. I don't know why, but everything that we are told and what people parrot, and they really do parrot, is a lie. It's a complete misinterpretation. Now, life really doesn't, in many ways, to most people, seem to have a straightforward understanding how something actually works, what it's about. Well, to a certain extent, it is different for each person because life really comes down to who you meet, who you live with, what your income is. It has to do with a lot of it, but where you're living. So if you're living in a good neighborhood, even if you're just renting a room or whatever goes on there, you think life is like that everywhere because you don't see the flip side of life, which is quite shocking. So we have to be very careful with that. So anybody that tells you anything is based strictly on their interpretation. Did they get it right? Did they go someplace and have a great time because they were with people that knew that area and could get around? There's so many things that go with it. So it's very much an interpretation of what life is. To an extent, to a lot it isn't. I mean, there's just facts that people just seem to ignore and for some reason want to state the company line. I see people going out there and making reviews on products and everything else, and these are crappy products, and they seem to have a problem with stating that. They want to say something nice, like a scumbucket woman who contacted me and said, I look for the nice things in Satanist child molesters. They're really good people. I knew one that took care of his dog and his cat. This is the kind of stupidity you get. And of course, there's the old cliche out there, people. The great traveler of the world. He had been every place, South America, Tibet, Asia, China, you name it. The traveler was there. So they asked him, what's the best place to go to? And he stated Fargo, North Dakota. I mean, with all the places you've been in the entire world, you say Fargo, North Dakota? How does that make any sense? Well, the seasoned traveler answered, well, I met two nymphomaniacs there. So the whole idea, it's your experience. And people seem to whitewash their experiences. They want to say they had a good time, even if they didn't. People don't want any conflict. They want to stand in line. They want to be pushed to the side because they don't want to get any conflict. They don't want to say anything. They don't want to open their little cowardice mouths. And, this has gone on for, millenniums of people that refuse to get in the thick of things. And of course, since you don't do that, nothing ever changes. If people didn't acquiesce to, give into all the rotten things going on in this world, we would have less rotten stuff. But everybody's an intrinsic coward. Everybody wants to go along. They want to be with the people in charge who will pat them on their bottom while taking their money. It's all part of the nonsense. And I see this all the time when, don't you get it? Don't you see it? People want to make excuses for crappy products they review. What's the matter? They're afraid somebody else won't send them a product? Well, that guy talked bad about that. I'm not going to send him my product. Well, that may be the case. That just makes you honest. And if someone is worried about their product to send it to you, that you're going to criticize it unjustly, well, you got to wonder if you should be involved in that product anyway. But I see that all the time. People are making statements about things that don't even work well and saying how good they are in general. Just doesn't make sense. Goes on and on. That perpetrates bad information going around, people buying bad products, people staying with bad places. And of course, if you're a do-nothing bend over all your life, well, no, it doesn't bother me they stole all my money. Doesn't bother me a bit. Doesn't bother me that it's a horrible service and I wasted 2 hours with it. Don't bother me. Gilligan's Island's on. Let's all party. So we run into all these things of people looking at things from a childish, ignorant, and pretty much cowardice viewpoint. Really comes down that people who want to maintain their fantasy state never want to get into conflict. And of course, this is a world of conflict. And if you don't ever get into conflict and you let all the bad stuff go on, which people have done for, as I said, for millenniums, even hundreds of years, no matter what you look at it, well, people are doing the same thing they did many, many years ago. So it's not much different. And of course, nothing ever changes. If your doctors keep giving you crap, not spending the time with you, and you don't stand up to them, well, you get with the system we have today. So it's the same old story. We keep voting in the same politicians, literally for 50, 60, 70 years. There are people that have been in office, die in office. They're in their 90s. Now, this is limitations when it comes to the presidency, but probably if they didn't have limitations to the presidency, the same guy would be in there today. This started because Roosevelt died in office with a limited terms of presidencies. But if you look at politics, which everybody says everything sucks to a degree, but it's never their senator, congressman, mayor, or not. Yeah, like they have a perfect city. So it's always somebody else's. They're the people. So you keep voting in the same people whatsoever. And most of the time, it's a very bogus thing to begin with. Like where I used to live, where Sonny Bono was the congressman. He died, drugged out of his mind, running into a tree. Some people say he was murdered. Same old story. What isn't a conspiracy? He wasn't too bright to begin with, but they voted his wife in, who was just a groupie bimbo, who still is to this day in his position, getting lots of money, a great retirement policy, and she's probably getting more money because he died as a congressman. So, from what I understand, if you serve as a congressman for a couple of years, some of the hidden stuff that you get a pension for life, a couple of terms, I should say. I wonder if that's true or not, but it's not surprised because that's what they want. So, and of course, then you're beholden to the government. So, but the point is nothing changes. It doesn't have to be political. It doesn't have to be something that gets you in trouble. It's just the fact of your experiences with something, whether it's a restaurant or going to a town or a place or a hotel. It seems like people think it's perfectly fine for the toilets not to flush, for the place to stink. And they have everything that goes on with that. And that's the kind of reality that people run into and say nothing about it. So there are some serious problems here that we have to look at in the bigger picture of what that's all about. So this is the reason why nothing ever changes while you get bad information. Where does this come from? Well, I really have never dealt with anything. As soon as I research it, I find out the truth, and it's almost completely opposite of what we know. Another issue comes up, which I will be talking about in depth in other videos, is this whole fantasy about Ireland and what it's all about. And how people, it's a great place to open a corporation and they have low taxes and everything else. Wrong. All lies. Now, who perpetrates this? Well, of course, the local Irish, who are not very honest, don't want to say that because they make lots of money opening up crap corporations, charging all sorts of money, and then getting you into really hot water with a very oppressive anti-business government that's trying to get every penny out of everybody. So the whole idea is this is one of the worst places you could possibly open a corporation. And it's not much better living there. There's absolutely no housing in Ireland. And to add to that, they brought in 50,000 Nazis, otherwise known as Ukrainians. The people that killed 1.5 million Jews in World War II. A country that is ran today by the Adolf Hitler division of the military. Oh, yeah, there's a Jew running it, Dr. Door. Oh, how nice. We all know that that's a big setup, and there was a Jewish guy before that as well. Really sad. So the whole idea is that, and this is one of the problems with everybody, because everybody can be bought regardless of that. And of course, the only stress this guy ever did, who was a TV personality, was get a cold bagel one day. So the whole idea is that this is all nonsense. So just like everything you study. Oh, the poor Ukrainians that were attacked. They attacked the Russians in 2012 and a huge amount of Russian citizens that are on the border there and killed them and harassed them, etc. But that's okay, right? Unless you're America, who invades everybody at the drop of a hat. We invaded an entire country thousands of miles from us. We think they got you something. Saddam Hussein, and killed millions of people for the corporations and the banks. Oh, sorry. Well, this is ridiculous. But that's perfectly fine, right? So the whole idea is I like how people rationalize things and then, everybody wants to condemn everybody else to a large degree, but there certainly is plenty of blame to go around. And certainly the United States is far from innocent, killing 60 million Native Americans. and all the other people they killed for virtually no reason. One, they could, usually the weak and who they could victimize easily. So they didn't do too good in other places, like in WW2, where the Allied forces won. Yeah, but it certainly wasn't the weak-kneed Americans that did much. There were numerous people fighting in both theaters of that war, and Europe was won by the Russians, as was basically the Pacific, where they were putting pressure on Japan. And of course, there were many, many courageous fighters throughout Europe and in the Pacific, from the Chinese to the Filipinos to people who gave, hundreds of thousands of their lives to this that are not even mentioned. All we want to mention is the goofball nutjob MacArthur, who basically gave up the Philippines and for whatever bizarre reason. But of course, that's just history, people. We don't want to bother with that. So why do we keep getting all this different information? You can't believe anything. The capper of it all is the fact here is that one of the things that really is non-political to a degree, it is corporate though, is our diets and our food. Breakfast is the most important day. Thank you, General Corporation, because that's who started that. Bacon. General Corporation again. It was all started by companies that had excess of pork bellies and then said, this is the perfect breakfast. And the same thing with everything. Why is breakfast important? Well, you need more sugar in your blood instead of balancing it out. You shouldn't need sugar to get going in the day, just like you shouldn't really need caffeine. You should be functioning okay. And if you're having to pump yourself up with caffeine or sugar, there's something wrong with your health, mentally and physically. So what is all this stuff? I mean, none of this goes back in history of meaning anything. Breakfast is actually very new. People never ate breakfast until relatively recently. It could be as recent as the 50s, maybe the 40s. Everybody took a lunch, and they had a fairly large lunch, and that was most of it. And when they came home at night, I'm not sure if people had, quote, dinner or supper or anything else to any great degree. They probably had some meal then, but nobody cared about breakfast, and people didn't do all that much snacking. So we all have to understand that this is just a fantasy. And again, all of what I state can be verified by third parties very easily. You just don't read. And I'm a professional researcher. So I'm constantly doing that. And I know what to listen. I've done it so much. I know what to listen for. I know what is out there. But the information isn't being hidden. Everybody knows you're not going to read anything. That's just the way it is. People don't read. It's amazing we have a book industry, which apparently is fairly large, but what are people reading? Romance novels? Jane and Monkeyhead? So the whole idea is, I don't know what's going on with all that stuff, but it's pretty sad when we look at all these things. So everything is a lie. Everything is disinformation. And, as I said, we prove this with a diet. We've been told for many years how bad fat is for you. Well, fat isn't bad for you. Fat is good for you. That's where you get a lot of nutrients, such as you build your body. Now, there are good fats and bad fats. So if you're eating processed fats and vegetable oils and all those poisons that pollute your body, that are in everything because they're cheap, corn oils, you name it, sunflower seed oil, all these things. Well, this stuff is bad for you. Oils in themselves, olive oil, walnut oil, avocado oil, your body loves. Your body doesn't build up and clog your system with fats. That's another lie. Most of the clogging of your arteries was basically coming from hardening of the arteries, which is a buildup of calcium, which has absolutely nothing to do with fat. I don't think fat even has calcium in it. Then we have to understand the fact that it has really never been fat that made people fat. Even people that had bad livers in the past, which are alcoholics, well, alcohol is a sugar. And only the liver can handle that sugar. It's got to go through the liver. The liver can't handle it, so it makes it into fat. And if it keeps not handling it, it builds up more and more fat. And then you get a fatty liver. But this is what everybody has now because of sugar. And sugar and fruits are not natural. Neither are a lot of vegetables, for that matter. Where are all these people that were eating these varied diets? Who was having avocados 100 years ago? Well, maybe where avocados come from. I think there's a lot in Mexico or whatever. Maybe the Mexicans were eating, but there wasn't any avocados that I remember. This is something new because they're so profitable. It's really been the last 20 or 30 years. Where did you get that? And where did you get all these fruits and stuff? Nobody had fruits. This was all modern society that started growing these in particular regions. You know, peaches come from Georgia and regions like that, but you can't grow peaches everywhere. So the point is that all of this is regionally based, everything else. Citrus come from China, from what I understand. The point is, how many people are having citrus trees? Now, people brought citrus trees over from China, and people were a lot more mobile than you think in the past. And that's one thing that, again, confuses people. But people didn't have varied diets. They ate the same thing day in and day out because that's all they could afford and had access to. There wasn't that many different crops grown in a lot of environments. Well, how many crops are you going to be able to grow in most of Europe? Now, there are parts of Europe like Spain and Portugal that have hot weather, and you can grow Italy. You can grow the more citrusy stuff there. But, you know, everything has its own environment. Avocados require huge amounts of water. So where is that coming from? Who can grow it? And what is the reality of that, including nuts and everything else? Whether they're good for you or not is not the point. They only grow in certain areas. So who had that? And even today, nuts are expensive. I frankly doubt there are very many nuts anywhere in the world until recently. So this is all, you know, almonds. One almond takes a gallon of water to make. Can you imagine that? 1 gallon of water to make one almond? Shocking. So this happened with growing in certain growing regions, particularly growers that were sitting on top of huge water supplies like the ones in California right now, who are able to survive. They're on top of giant water tables. So they drill down, they're able to do that, and they can grow their almonds and waste water on something that probably should discontinue. So the whole idea is, what is on? So we've been lied about that. We've been lied that fat is terrible when you want to eat basically a fairly high-fat diet. Now, when people say the carnivore diet, people think eating meat, they think protein. Well, no, that's not it at all. You're supposed to be eating a certain amount of proteins and, 20, 30, and don't hold me to this, 20, 30% proteins and more like 40, 50% fats. And the carnivore diet also includes eggs and cheese and so forth, which it seems like everybody does really well on. So we've been lied to that again. And people are still shouting, you can't live on meat. There's nothing. You know, there's vitamin C in meat. People have been living on meat for years. That's all they eat, particularly beef, which has been demonized by a bunch of goofball nutritionists who want to make money off of you. So the whole idea is we've got all these researchers from the toppy colleges telling you that this is the way it is, when they're really just taking the white envelope stuffed with little green things in envelopes that they are being told what to say. This goes back to even chemicals, which I've always been ardently against and still are. Additives to your food are really bad. We found this out with artificial sugars, which have now been shown to probably cause cancer. Not surprising. This has been talked about for years. We just don't know the facts of it. And I'm still if we don't know the facts. But the bottom line is we don't need that crap. But, you know, if you're... the bottom line is that this stuff is still in everything, and that isn't going to change. And it certainly is all over, quote, Europe, who people think is so special. Yeah, they like to outlaw a bunch of chemicals that they know the rest of the world uses so that they can stop their products from entering the EU. Yet their products are full of garbage, which I'll be showing in a new video here soon. So the whole idea is we have to understand that in the bigger picture of what's going on as well. So we're lied to about everything. We're lied to about how wonderful the taxes are in Ireland, when it's not. Here's the Irish tax. I'm not going to be doing a whole thing on this. So once you make 40,000, which would be about 40,000 US dollars, not much money, is it? 40,000 in this day and age, you can't really even get by. The average American is making upwards of 90,000 now. So they say. It seems like a lot of money, but the bottom line is that this is what you need to survive now. But once you reach $40,000, you are taxed 40%. Just let's get some rounded out numbers so everybody can handle them. So 40%, if you have a dollar, 40% of that is 40 cents. So 40% from 100 is 40 cents, leaving you 60 cents. So if you think you're going to doing great and you make $100,000 in Ireland, you're making 60,000, which is just barely enough to get by in the most expensive country in Europe with the highest rents. And the worst services, backward transportation, a very hostile government to business, and everything that goes with that. So these are the fantasies that everybody lives in because they're perpetrated. The fantasies of everything that is pretty much done for personal interest. German beer is good. German beer is some of the worst beer in the world. It's bitter, it's poorly made, it's garbage on average. Like everything, there are some okay German beers. I wouldn't say there's any great beers. Great beers are Heineken's, that's a great beer. The original Budweiser out of Czechoslovakia, delicious. Qingdao from China, I personally like. I mean, these are good beers that taste good and are not bitter because they brew them properly. German beers intrinsically are bad. They're people that actually like beer made out of wheat, which is enough to make you vomit. And actually, I've tried a few of it and have vomited, by the way. These are people that put beer in plastic bottles. And I'll be showing you one of these soon as well. So we all have to understand these misnomers you have. That Germans are Caucasians. No, they're not. They're Aryans. They state it themselves. They come from Iran. They're one of these Middle Eastern Arabic tribes, even though, Persians hate. Nobody like, I'm no Arab. I'm from Jordan. I'm a Jordanese. Yeah, well, we can define the Middle East, because Arabs only come from Arabia, but we know what we're talking about. Middle Eastern tappies. And of course, they look a little different as well, depending on all of these. But that's a fact. You don't know that. What you hear is the white power slogans done by these ignoramus bozos, these pseudo. Because most of these people that I knew that were white supremacists weren't white at all. So their backgrounds were so varied out of non-whites. The real whites were the Etruscans, the Greeks, the Italians. All of this has changed because of Islamic invasions. And of course, the Celts and, can't think of the rest of them out there. There's the Celts. Nordics are kind of a Middle Eastern tribe. They are lighter skinned, but they still are basically more Arabic in nature. But Northerns have this mix again. You're talking about your Scandinavians, etc. And so if you're looking for, quote, Caucasians, which what they used to call white people from the Caucasus Mountains, this is totally different from the people who emigrated through the, basically the Indo-Europeans, which went through India from basically the Middle East. So again, you don't know that because you don't know your history. This has nothing to do with anything. I don't have any problems with anybody, really. These are just facts. People are going to state stupid stuff, and they should get it. So, as you said, the bottom line is the Nazis never used the term, quote, white power. They deliberately differentiated themselves by calling themselves Aryan. That wasn't a mistake. An area, this is the area, the Arabic area of Persia, now known as Iran, known as Iran, where these particular types come. And they look exactly like generally Iranians, Germans do, exact features, the big noses, the big ears, and of course the only thing that's slightly different is a slightly whiter skin, and of course almost everybody in Europe has light-colored eyes. But blonde hair, blue eyes are Nordics and have nothing to do with the Middle European Deutsches. So all of this is, you just don't know what you're talking about. Nobody knows what they're talking about. And everybody's going to hide this for their own particular reasons. So, they're pamphlet readers, and they get their information from some prejudiced pamphlet. So it just amazes me. The head of the, in Britain, I forget what they're called, the British First people, Britain for British for Britain, for the Britain for British. You hear this in Deutschland for Deutsch, whatever that means. Is a Greek guy. He's Greek. So this is the head of the party to keep all the foreigners out. Yet he doesn't consider himself that because he was born in England. But that doesn't count. Your racial background defines you to a large extent. Where you're born is your cultural affiliation. It's not really your racial background. Because when people talk about others, they're talking mostly about their racial background. So the bottom line is that, you can be black and say that, well, I'm born here in London. I'm British. Well, you're culturally British and your citizenship is, but you're obviously racially something else, which means that your culture is quite different. You look different as well. So, I mean, there is a cultural stuff you grow up in, because I always find it amusing for all the Brits, no matter where they come from, whether they're Pakistanis or blacks, and they have this British accent, which is kind of always amusing to me. But that's your culture. So, but basically, when you talk about a country, you're talking mostly about their racial characteristics. So we all have to keep that in mind in terms of it. So these are all the ignoramus lies you're taught. It's been summed up with the diet where we're fed poisons and told all this stuff. There's no credible history to go proving so many medical treatments and what's going on. All this stuff tends to be a fantasy. And we all buy into it when we allow people. Get your own information. You don't have to believe anything I just told you. Go out there and get that information yourself and see what I've said is correct. Because everything I state can be verified by third parties. At least 98% of what I state has been verified in one way or another by third parties. So it's just a matter of giving people facts. Now, a lot of people may think it's outrageous because you don't know that. You don't know the fact of what goes on. So the whole idea is that it's pretty sad that people live in these illusions. I've seen it time and time again. And it's because Buddy Joe told you that. Your idiot teacher told you that. You heard it from your cousin. You read it in Goofball magazine, written by Alfred E. Newman. So the whole idea is that all these people that you got information from are all bogus sources. And even if it comes from a pseudo-credible source, and pseudo means false, but the whole writing about things like the nitrates that are in meat. Well, apparently, so I've been told, I don't know how true it is, but the source of it is kind of credible, is the fact that this was only established that there was something wrong with sodium nitrate. Now, nitrates are very natural in your diet. This was done by one goofball study out of the Moron Institute of Technology, otherwise known as the Massachusetts. And this was just one little poorly researched paper that was not verified by other scientists, saying that this wasn't good in your meat. So it turns out that there really isn't that much sodium nitrates and nitrites in your food, particularly your bacons and other things. This is a very small amount, and you get lots more of it by just eating things that you would think are innate, like lettuce and greens, have more nitrates in them than your bacon. Scooby snacks? So here we go again, just total disinformation that gets picked up by one person or another. So if things are toxic, we should know about it. But people have been eating pounds of artificial sweeteners. And finally, there's some information coming out, which has been talked about for years, of how bad this is. But you're going to find it packed into everything, particularly in Europe, because there's giant factories that make this stuff in Germany in particular. And they're going to make sure that everybody buys that, whether it's good for you or not. And they don't just use one, they use 2 or 3 of these things to get a certain sweetness flavor. So that's all the purity laws that you're going to get through the EU. They outlaw one thing, and then, of course, they use tons of the other stuff. So there's something wrong with using chlorine, which, again, sounds, it's a terrible chemical. It's an oxygenator. It produces oxygen to kill bacteria. There's nothing overly toxic about it unless you're going to drink a cup of it. So the whole idea is why you would do that, but people use it for water purification. They take it in baths. It's an oxygenator. 2 types of salts. Well, I'm not sure you want to be exposed to huge amounts of it, but the whole idea that certainly washing something off to kill bacteria certainly is positive instead of getting salmonella, which is deadly to everybody. Yeah, but we don't want to have a drop of chlorine on our chickies. All this kind of stuff is the kind of nonsense. But since America does that, it's jumped upon by the Euros, particularly the Germans, who are very anti-American, to stop that from coming in the country. And of course, their buddies, which have been since from thousands of years, the British, who are basically half German, if not more. And so the whole idea is that this is what they do to keep your food out so their farmers can get richer. So what we do is price it cheaper in America, their foods, so you buy it more. So they can take over more and more of your supermarket industry. And that's okay, but you won't see none of that in Euro. So the whole idea is all that stuff that goes on is the kind of games that are played out there that we have to be all very, very careful of. And the fact is that you just can't take anything for granted. At this particular point, if I ever went back to the Grand Canyon and looked at it, I would say, well, is that the Grand Canyon? Is it really that big? Is this any of the facts we got on it right? And how did somebody measure what it is from the top to the bottom? Or is it guesswork? So all that stuff, we just tell lies. I mean, apparently the West Coast in particular has remnants of Chinese walls that were built in parts of California. There's been talk of Egyptians making it to the Grand Canyon and burying some of their relics there. Is any of this true, or is this just more urban myths? The problem is that we can't really disprove it or believe it. It sounds outrageous. Could be true, because everything else we know is wrong. And of course, if we find out anything, we're never going to find out how the pyramids are built, how certain things done. And of course, it's done by it's done by little gray dudes, and they had little gray hats on, and they built the pyramids. Well, the bottom line, it seems like all of these ancient structures that seem so baffling to modern bozo man have been built by man. And man is genius. One put together properly and organized properly in a team to do things can achieve anything. And they don't need the help of some little gray mucky heads that seem to have done nothing for this world but leave their personal trash here, as we do with the rest of the universe. So I don't really know what's going on with all that stuff, but that's not the reality that goes on. The reality that goes on is the fact that we're living in a giant illusion, and people are perpetrating what they want. Breakfast is important if you're General Mills. Cereals are good for you, and to make them better for you, we'll spray them with a little bit of vitamins so they're not totally worthless. We're going to feed you a bunch of junk. We're going to tell you bread's good for you, and it's really not. It never was. And the facts are very, very confusing. It is interesting when we get into a lot of data, which I'm going to cover in other videos, is that there's a huge amount of diabetes in China. They are not overweight. None of them are overweight to any great degree, but they have lots of diabetes. So, interesting that thin people, because they've been blaming weight and diabetes for a long time. So obviously there's a problem. Now, is it all the carbs they eat, all the rice? They're also the highest consumers of pork. So what's causing this? Oddly enough, the highest rate of diabetes in the world, and it's quite shocking, is Pakistan. 35% of the Pakistanis have diabetes. Well, I thought, strange. They have a very mixed diet. They eat a lot of meat and they eat a lot of vegetables as well. Isn't that weird? Why is that? So we're going to go into all these strange and mysterious facts that I've recently uncovered to figure out all the things. So is the lowest diabetes? Well, let's find out in my next video. But the whole idea is that this is all the things that we don't know about and we're told lies. Eating sugar doesn't, being fat doesn't. Well, it just doesn't equate. They're not that fat in Pakistan. They're not that fat in most of these countries. India has a high rate as well. I always thought the Indians ate nothing but vegetables. And of course, I guess they use a fair amount of carbs there. But so the whole idea is it doesn't seem to be directly linked to weight, as we're saying, even though there are other experts that say if you lose 20 pounds, generally most Westerners don't have diabetic problems again, or at least stage 2. So, meaning your blood sugar goes on. These are all the things we don't know, and we don't know why and what's going on. And nobody's ever going to tell you the truth about anything. You have to find your own truth. You have to understand that everybody has an axe to grind. Everybody's lying to you. And if you approach everything from that point of view, life's going to be a lot better. So I haven't ran into anybody that's ever told me the truth in anything. When I research what's actually going on, I find that what I was told by them is wrong. At least 90% of it is wrong. Well, work from that, life will be better. That's all part of understanding the path of gnosis. Should you believe anybody? What's the truth? They've taken it to the last extent. I talked about this before, but diet, which we all live on, has been a total fantasy created by corporations, backed up by paid off researchers. That's your MITs and all your little colleges who are getting hundreds of millions of dollars to give out lies. And of course, it's backed by all the teachers that do that, and all the other people involved in the industries that know better and refuse to see it. So all of this world that we live in is a total, complete, bogus lie. You're not living in the Matrix. You created the Matrix, and you live in your own personal fake reality by listening to fools and being their buffoons. Until next time.